what's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm here today with another client interview for you guys. Really excited about this one today. I've got Kelly on with me. Kelly is honestly one of the sharpest dudes I've ever worked with, and it's been really fun working with him. And he just wrapped up his recruiting process, was super successful, got multiple offers from some of the top shops and top groups out there. And so I definitely want to get him on here to talk to you guys about his experience a little bit, shed some light on how he was able to do what he did, talk a little bit about his mindset, and hopefully just help you guys walk away with some takeaways that are going to help you in your own recruiting process as well. So Kelly, I want to thank you for taking time to be on here with us.
Sam, well, thank you. Really huge pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So to start off, if you don't mind, maybe just introducing yourself a little bit, giving people kind of like a high level view of what type of candidate you are, your profile, so they can kind of relate and, hey, how similar is this guy to me? Or maybe you're not similar at all, but why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, no, happy to. Yeah. So, it's quick about me. I'm a business and finance major at a Target school right now. Really, have always been focused on breaking into investment banking. Specifically, I was always interested in sort of the focus of kind of technology and finance. Given that where our world's going, the digitization of the world, I really saw technology being the forefront of where we're headed. And so that was a lot of my focus throughout the recruiting process, really being at the intersection of tech and finance. Knew that investment banking would be a great place for me to get a super great training ground, set myself apart, and really build up the skills that I need to open my doors up to any facet of the business world. And just have always tried to have a really, judicious as well as gritty and hustle focused mindset as I've gone through this entire process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I'm thinking back, I'm trying to remember roughly when we started working together. Do you remember what month that was? I think it was like you came to us in like
want to say December. It was December of 2020.
December of 2020. Okay, so it was like about halfway through sophomore year, right?
Correct.
And so at the time, tell us, like, what had you already been doing up to that point as far as investment banking recruiting goes? And I assume you already started networking and prepping and doing some stuff. And like, how was that going, like, prior to Wall Street Mastermind?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was definitely lucky to have known that I wanted to do finance coming into college. Majoring in finance was super helpful for me. But to be completely candid, a lot of my friends who go to other top Target schools, any top Target school talk about their degrees in finance. A lot of that stuff you learn in class doesn't really apply in the real world. Whether it's investment banking, private equity, hedge funds, wherever you want to go. And so for me, what I was doing to prepare early was, obviously my finance classes were helpful, but more importantly, it was networking, reaching out. I always knew that investment banking specifically is a people job. And it's someone where, at the end of the day, investment banks derive their value from the relationships they create across the street. And so for me, I knew that, also getting into some of these top competitive positions required having to know somebody at one of these shops. So I was just focusing on really building my network, number one. Number two was just kind of leveraging the resources of my school. Definitely was helpful, I think, in terms of getting introduced to the more practical side of finance, valuation, accounting, et cetera. Wouldn't say it was exactly everything I was looking for. And I think it was a bit more of a one size fits all solution for me. But that was really what I was doing prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. So, I mean, look, I think the most interesting thing about you from my perspective was when you came to us and you first talked to us, we do a strategy session with everyone where we learn more about what your recruiting goals are, what challenges you're having, why you're even looking for help, right? What really sticks out in my memory from that initial conversation was, I just remember thinking, like, okay, this guy goes to a top Target school. He sounds super sharp. At least when I was talking to you, just like I am now. I'm sure people can tell you're like a sharp dude, right? And you got good grades. You got good grades. Your resume pretty solid, right? And like, you seem to just have your shit together, right? And a lot of times, I think if someone else has seen you, and they might be like, okay, well, this guy doesn't really need help, or he doesn't really need that much help. Like, he's probably gonna get into banking anyway. In fact, I think I told you at the time, I was like, I'm sure you'll get into banking either way, right? And so I want to kind of delve into your mindset at the time, like, why were you even looking for extra help? And I know you just said like, hey, you were using the resources at your disposal already from school and things like that. And it was more of a one
Mhm.
size fits all solution. What did you mean by that? And like, what was it that you were kind of looking for that you felt like maybe you didn't already have?
Yeah, no, these are all super great points and great question. Let's just keep it honest. These are all table stakes, everything you described. So the fact of the matter, like by definition, me using the resources that my university provided me, whether you go to a top target or a non-target school, at a non-target, you're obviously going to have to hustle a lot harder to get access to those similar resources or similar networking circles. At the end of the day, though, everybody's doing that. So I wasn't really setting myself apart by doing what everybody else was doing. Like by definition, there are a certain number of seats for my school, and if I'm going to do everything that everyone else is doing, then I'm not going to get one of those seats, most likely, unless I get lucky, right? And I'm not someone who likes to leave my life up to luck. I really like to be as in control of my future as possible in a very positive way, recognizing there's just some things you can't control. That being said, really what I was looking for in the program was more of a specialized understanding around a couple of things. So number one, the ability to be able to talk to folks like Sam, as well as other some of the other ambassadors who were like some of the other coaches, Wall Street Mastermind coaches who exist within the program, was extremely helpful for me. So that was the biggest thing, was that getting that high touch feedback from whether it was Sam. Sam, he was a bit more busy, so sometimes he wasn't always around just because he has so much things to handle. But like a lot of the coaches, for example, were always being willing to answer my questions. I was able to bring up very unique situations to them that you wouldn't experience, whether it's a bad email or a consideration on who to contact, how one should go about contacting. Like you just can't get that kind of high touch feedback in a Volt guide that your school might provide you. So that was really one of the biggest value props I saw in the program from Sam's Slack group that he's using right now, where you can really not only get feedback from the coaches, but also all the students who are currently recruiting and have recruited in the past post their technical questions, post their behavioral questions in the general sort of portion of the Slack group on the general channel. And you get to see how people are learning, how people are answering, and get just to understand the different use cases and types of questions that are coming up in real time, right? As opposed to the outdated stuff you see in the sort of BIWS or Volt guides. So that was the biggest value prop for me. Second as well was I really was a fan of the ATM sort of accelerated technical mastery program that Sam had. So it focused a lot less on sort of, I think a lot of folks, when they talk about like preparing for investment banking interviews, they think about, oh, like modeling, and I have to know financial modeling. I really have to be able to like be an Excel whiz. I'll be real, I don't really know how to do a VLOOKUP. But one thing I do know is understanding how the three statements fit together, how that works in terms of enterprise value, what goes into valuing company, what are the different valuation methodologies, how can one apply them to different industries. That deep level understanding without needing to understand how to be a financial modeler, but more importantly, understanding the very key conceptual understandings behind the financial underpinnings of all these different kinds of questions you're going to get in interviews. That was the most helpful for me. And the ATM program was extremely well put together and accelerated in a way where in the course of, I want to say a month, if you're really dedicated, a few weeks even, you can really get yourself up to speed conceptually and be able to ace your technical interview questions without needing to have gone through, tons of Excel modeling courses. But high level, those are the really biggest value props I was looking for out of the program.
Got it. Okay. So you talked about a couple of things. You talked about one, the kind of that high level or high touch feedback, kind of on demand, 24/7. Anytime you have a question, all you gotta do is hop in the Slack channel and being able to talk to someone who's qualified. All of our coaches have worked at top banks and work on the buy side and kind of know how the recruiting process works. So having that kind of just in your back pocket, obviously, like you just flip out your phone, send out a message. That's one of the big value props for you. And then the other thing you mentioned is kind of the community aspect of it. You're not just doing this on your own, but also you're going through it with all the other students, both past and present. Some of them are alumni who are already working in banking, but everyone's always helping each other out, asking questions, answering each other's questions. It's a community like where we call ourselves a wolf pack for that reason, where everyone's trying to succeed together. And so that was like really, really beneficial to be a part of, it sounds like. And the last thing is just kind of like learning the technicals in the most efficient manner possible. And doing it differently than how most people are doing, which is like without any financial modeling courses, you have to do hundreds of hours of financial modeling practice and whatnot. Like you're actually learning the underlying concepts. And by the way, just to kind of dispel this myth that's out there, because you had a bunch of interviews, right? Like how many firms did you end up interviewing with? Do you remember?
Quite a few. Let's think about this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Upwards of 10, I think 10 to 12 interviews I had. Yeah.
Yeah,
With
10
different
to
firms.
12 different firms, right? And some of
10
these,
different firms. Yeah.
yeah, and so a lot of these firms are some of the top firms out there. We're talking like Bulge
Mhm.
Bracket, Elite Boutique
Yeah.
firms.
And by the way, I was focusing my recruiting process very narrow. Like that's a narrow recruiting process. Some of my colleagues and friends at other schools, they were really casting their net wide with far more than 12 firms. So I was definitely on the shorter side.
Right. And we'll touch on that in a second too. I'm gonna come back to that. But you're interviewing with basically like only the top firms that are out there because like
Hmm.
that was where you set the bar, right?
Right.
Um,
Personally.
and did you ever get asked to build a financial model in any of these?
I wish like to, for all the myth, people out there, I wish I could tell you I did. I never have received one question on an Excel model, or I've never been asked to screen share or break out an Excel model. If I was a post banking, associate and I wanted to, that might be the case, but as an undergrad hiring, not a single question.
Yeah. And so every interview though, what they did do is test you on your conceptual understanding. In fact, I would say
Absolutely.
with a lot of the top groups, elite boutiques, bulge brackets,
Oh,
even buy
100%.
side, some of the buy side interviews that you had, they're not asking you like definitional questions of like, hey, what's
Not at
the
all.
formula for this? They're asking you very open-ended, like
Yes.
application, conceptual type questions where you have to actually take what you know and apply it to like a real world
Right.
situation, which is much, much, much more difficult to do, right?
Right. And not even just application oriented, but almost feeding in behavioral elements to it. One of the biggest things I was asked to do was a really difficult question where no matter what I answered, the partner was going to tell me the opposite answer, and I was expected to be able to ask him, like, stand by my opinion, explain why I was right, as well as ask him his opinion, and that what he told me was the reason I got the offer, because I was able to think outside the box and not just sort of accept it and try to, like, switch my viewpoint around, but stick by my opinion. And it
Right.
speaks to exactly what you preach a lot in Wall Street Mastermind with Wolfpack is, yeah, you can nail all the technical questions, but if behaviorally you're not killing it, then you're most likely not going to get the offer.
Yep. Yep. That's a great point. And so understood. So that was kind of what you're looking for, which is something that's different from what everyone else is doing. Something
Right.
that's gonna give you a leg up on all of your peers at school who are already using all the school resources. And so it sounds
Absolutely.
like you felt like you got that. The other thing though, going back to my point, is like I was very candid with you in our first
Hmm.
conversation, which is based on my assessment, I feel like someone with your profile, you can get into banking regardless, with or without my help, right? And people might be
Hmm.
surprised to hear that I would tell you that because they probably think that, oh, I'm just here to gaslight people and tell them that, without Wall Street Mastermind, you have no chance of getting into banking. In fact, I've seen people say that online, and I'm like, that's just not our style. We're very
Nah, it's just not true at all.
and so I told you that, but I think
Right.
tying back to what you said earlier, you were targeting a very narrow set of firms. And
Yes.
so the part of the reason I think why you decided to do this program anyway was that
Hmm.
your goal wasn't just to get into investment banking. You wanted only like the upper echelon, like the top firms, basically, or the top group.
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
right? Can you
Exactly.
kind of talk about
Exactly.
that mindset a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
why not just save the money and do it yourself? Because let's
Hmm.
be completely honest too, this investment in this, like, we're not the cheapest program out there, right? We don't claim to
Hmm.
be, we're not trying to be, we don't want to be, we want to be the best program. And
Hmm.
obviously, this wasn't like a super easy investment for you and your family to make, right?
Right.
And so I feel like most people in your situation, if they're like, well, I can already get into banking anyway,
Hmm.
and this is not the cheapest thing for me, I'd rather just save that money and do something else, right?
Right.
So why did you still decide to invest in a program like this?
Yeah.
Like, I
No,
think
these
it's
are these.
a unique mentality that you have.
Yeah, no, these are all really, really important questions, and definitely a ton of great points you brought up. Kind of breaking this down, the first thing I thought about is that it depends on what is the mindset you have, right? I'm someone who really focuses on delaying short-term gratification for the long-term benefits. Really looking at, what can I forego today, sacrifice today that I can gain a lot bigger tomorrow. So for me, I thought, obviously you have to think about your priorities. A lot of my friends would be spending that money that I could be investing in the program, going out and partying, drinking, or just spending it on anything they want. For me, I knew that the most value additive investment I could make would be that in myself. I mean, Warren Buffett says it all the time. The best investment you can make is in yourself. And so for me, I really said to myself, okay, I know it's going to be a big investment. Sam was extremely like, a helpful and supportive and just helping me work out how I'm going to go about like, structuring, the payments and stuff like that. But more importantly, it was really about devoting like the capital I did have to something that mattered. And so for me, speaking to the points of, yes, I could have gotten into banking by myself. What I was looking for though was the top investment banks and the top buy side firms that I really wanted to target. And you will like I said, you will by definition not get that result if you are doing what everybody else is doing, even at a target school. Because let's be real, these top buy side and investment buy side firms and investment banks are looking for the cream of the cream. So not only just the top target school kids, but the top kids among the target school kids. So if you're doing what every other target school kid's doing in my situation, you're just not going to get that result. You might get a middle market investment bank or something that's really sort of average, but you won't get that upper echelon of sort of firms. And so for me, to answer your question, in short, it really comes down to my priorities. I want to prioritize my career, prioritize my long-term benefit, and prioritize myself, as opposed to any short-term pleasures or kind of, validation tools I could be getting now. Second being that I wanted to go above what was table stakes. And that was really what fed into my decision to want to do Wall Street Mastermind as opposed to just trying to wing it on my own.
Yeah. And I would say, just to add to that, obviously, I think there's a non-zero chance that you could have gotten into a top group on your own anyway, right? But I think a lot of times what I notice people will say, well, I know so-and-so who got into this top group on their own without your help. So I'm just going to try to do it on my own anyway. All right. Well, I'm going to do it on my own too, because if they could do it, then I should.
Yeah, but there's a lot of external factors that feeds that. You'll never know who has a family connection, who has the extra help, who has a lucky interview that day. So many factors that feed into getting a great offer.
That's a good point too. And that's a different point than what I was going to make. But that's a good point too. In fact, it's funny because we get on calls with students sometimes and they're like, well, I don't know anyone that's used your program before. And then they come to the program and they're like, oh my God, my friend, this person and that, I have like 3 friends that are in this program. I'm like, yeah, they didn't tell you about it because it's a comparative advantage for them. They're not going to go out and tell everyone like, hey, you should do this program too. But like when you look at other people that are getting these results that you want, a lot of times you don't really know what happened or what allowed them to do that. Like
there's a lot going on behind the scenes in any person's success.
Right. So that's a good point. But the point I was actually going to make is, look, are you just looking for the fact that there's a non-zero chance that you can do something? Because anything is possible.
Sure.
But in this case, it sounded like your mentality is more like, I know I have a chance, but I want to maximize the probability of me getting into one of these groups. I want every possible advantage or competitive edge that I can have over my peers. And so that's a very different mentality, right? It's like, are you content with just, the bare minimum, or are you like, hey, I want to take my best shot. I know I have one shot at getting into these firms, and I want to take my best shot at it, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times that, dude, like we're spending so much time talking about mindset. Like people might think like, oh, the trick to you getting these offers was like something crazy we did on the technical side or the behavioral side. Yes, there's a lot of tactical stuff too, but I feel like a lot of times what really separates the winners and the losers in life, but not the losers, just the winners from people that are just above average, is the mindset. It's what's up here.
The wolf pack hustle is what we call it, right?
well, it's really, it's the way people make decisions.
Yeah.
Right? It's
exactly.
Your decision-making framework. Your input's going to determine your output, and if your framework is flawed, then you're going to get a suboptimal outcome.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think, dude, that was one thing that was really unique about you. Where I mean, you're a young dude. Like you're a second year college student. Like, not a lot of people talk about things like delaying short-term gratification for the long term and things like that, right? So I think that's really cool. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about like kind of like the recruiting process for you, because obviously, so you did like 10 to 12 interviews, and you got multiple offers. I remember you were listing out all the offers you got the other day. I think you got what, 5 or 6 offers?
5. Yep.
Actually, you got 6. I wrote
or 6. Sorry, 6. Technically, you're right. 6.
You got 6. I know the one you're forgetting. There was a firm.
Yeah.
There was
No,
a
it was weird that there was one firm, I won't name it, but there was a firm that actually I had participated in a general insight program for all students, regardless of background. And for some reason, they called me out of the blue to give me an offer without even interviewing, which was a really weird instance. Not a firm I was looking at all in terms of my top choices, but very interesting experience. I will say that was something that I don't know if that's ever going to happen to other people or why that was the case.
right, because that we won't name the firm, but that was like more of a upper middle market firm, right? Which is like
Yeah.
below the bar that you had set of like what you want to
Mhm.
target. And I remember you messaging me and saying, this firm just gave me an offer on the I haven't even interviewed with them. And it was like super early in the process. No one else has started interviewing yet. And you're like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna take this, but I'm like, yeah, I don't think you should take this either. I think we can get it.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience to say the least.
I've actually never seen that before.
Me neither.
I would say like I coached, we've coached close to 400 students at this point. I never seen anyone get an offer without interviewing at all, so that was pretty amazing. But
Yeah.
so you got 6 offers.
Definitely would not bank on it, I guess. Advice holds. Don't bank on that. I don't know why that was the case.
Yeah, that was weird. But so you got 6 offers along the way. And I think all the other offers you got were either like top like bulge bracket, or you got an elite boutique offer, you got a couple buy side offers.
Correct.
What like how did you manage that entire process? Because a lot of times, especially students like you who are getting multiple offers, we all know how the recruiting timeline is accelerating nowadays. Everyone's always pressuring you, trying to get you to accept right away. They give you like 2 days, 3 days, a week.
Oh my gosh, it's wild.
How did you manage to kind of like get so many offers and kind of leverage that against each other? Like, can you give people some advice on how you were able to do that?
Yeah, no, definitely it's an important question. I had to learn along the process. I think everyone does. It's really just all about like stacking up your bread, so to speak, and trying to figure out how you can leverage the opportunities you have in front of you for better offers and better opportunities until you get to a point that you're happy with, right? To be completely candid, I think there's two slices of the cake here. The one you're referring to is the accelerated process. This is something that I think during COVID, none of us expected, that the interview processes would get pushed back this far. Like I said, I was lucky. I knew I wanted to do finance coming into school. I'd started networking pretty early on in freshman year to facilitate the infrastructure to allow that to, myself to blossom when the recruiting process came along. And more specifically, what I mean by that is that I had contacts in the industry far long before people even considered starting to network. And I think the advice I'd have to give on that front is that a lot of folks, when they think about the recruiting process, think about, let's just say the recruiting process, for example, this year really start to kick off in March of 2021. A lot of folks, for example, if this kicks off in March, will start to network around February. The ambitious ones might start to network around January. I was networking in November of 2020. I was networking even pre-summer in freshman year. Do you have to go that far back? No, I don't think you have to be asking for jobs when you are a freshman. That is a little bit off-putting. But what I really did to set myself apart in the accelerated timeline was looking to network, not for the sake of getting a job, but for the sake of building relationships and getting advice from people in the industry. That allowed me to succeed in the recruiting process, because when it came along, I wasn't the kid who was hitting up, a professional a week before the application was due and saying, hey, can you push me into your process? Can you give me a referral? It was, oh, I've known you for a year, or I've known you for 6 months. I've known you for a few months. You're a great kid. You've gotten to know me as a person, not as just some sort of name on a paper. Happy to put in a referral for you. And they offered to do that for me. So that's the biggest piece of advice I have to folks who are looking to get in, is start as early as possible. That's exactly the same thing I tell people when it comes to doing the program at Wall Street Mastermind. Start as early as possible. You can't start too early. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. At the same time, be diligent. I'd say that's the biggest thing. In terms of just how to manage these competing deadlines, I think the number one thing is always trying to understand that there is a hugely different mindset that firms have pre and post offer. This is something that I underestimated a lot. And kind of, what I think I had to learn throughout the process was that pre-offer, you really are as disposable as possible. And even post-offer, that's truth. But when a firm is interviewing you, you have to prove yourself to them. Yeah. When you get the offer from a firm, they have to prove themselves to you to take it. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten offers from firms, and I've had just random MDs reach out to me, cold call me, or email me saying, let's hop on the phone, and they try to sell you. And what that allows you to do is get leverage. And what that leverage allows you to do is ask for more time to decide if you know that you're a high value candidate. And even if you aren't, still going for it, because they're most likely not going to take away your offer unless you really, excuse my French, unless you really fuck up, right? And then using that timeline to say, okay, if I have a great offer from a bank, I can go to some other bank and say, hey, listen, this firm is looking to take me on. This firm is giving me an offer. I want to express my interest in your firm as either whether it's your top choice or just my strong interest, and understanding how you can express to them that, hey, this firm has already vetted me and has already thought that I'm really good, but I'm more interested in your firm, firm B. So, here's me and here's what I have to offer. And that firm is most likely going to give you an interview. In fact, with the current firm that I have an offer from right now and that I've accepted, that is exactly how I got my interview. I came to them with a competing offer at a very top tier competing shop. And I said, hey, I have an offer from this shop. Can what's your recruiting timeline look like? A day later, I get a call from, one of the analysts who's running recruiting saying, can you interview tomorrow? The next day I had an offer in hand. So I hope that outlines a little bit in terms of, number one, how to get started early, but also number two, how to really leverage your opportunities to get an offer from one place, use that offer to leverage for another place, use that offer to leverage for another and another and another, until you can keep going and get the offer you want. And then, finally put the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I feel like obviously when you first came into the program, it was more our conversation between you and me, or you and Edgar, who's, obviously it was more around, prepping for interview answers and, talking about best tactics and strategies when it comes to networking and this and that. And I feel like for the last maybe 2 months or so, most of our conversation has been about like timeline management and
yes, that's a huge component.
One offer against another offer, and hey, I just got this offer, but like this deadline is, is due, it's exploding this time, and I have this other firm that I really
very, very stressful stuff. And this is part of the reason why Wall Street Mastermind is such a great value prop, because that kind of high touch feedback, especially like when things are moving at a really rapid velocity, you just can't get that from a Volt guy at your school, but you get that from Wall Street Mastermind.
Right. Well, and I think like, it's high touch, but also like you don't want just high touch feedback from anyone. You want high touch feedback from someone who's actually qualified to give you the feedback. Unfortunately, most of the people that are qualified to give you the feedback, they're busy working 80, 90, 100 hours a week.
Of course.
They're not in the business of just, being at your beck and call and giving you advice anytime you need it, right? I mean, how many times did you have a question that needed an urgent response to because the offer is exploding, or you got an email from the MD that you needed to know how to respond to, and just being able to get a quick response to that, I think is crucial, right?
Very crucial.
And I think the other thing that you talked about in terms of like, leveraging, like obviously, look, the stronger candidate you are, the more leverage you're gonna have, right? Because I think you mentioned one thing that's really important, which is if you're a like high priority candidate for them, they're going to be more inclined to cut you some slack or grant you an extension. Because I have seen people who ask for extensions and then get their offers rescinded. Like that does happen. Right?
Yeah, unfortunately. And you got to be very tactical with how you approach that thing. It's very relationship based.
Yeah, and it's relationship based, but also, so like part of that is like, how well have you networked with the people at the firm? Is there someone on the inside that's like really pulling for you?
Absolutely.
And the other thing's like, if you perform really, really well during the interview, like let's say like, because after every interview, they rank all the candidates. And so even if you got an offer, there's a difference if you're like the top of that list, or if you're like a borderline person where like, if you don't want it, they'll just give it to the next guy that's on the wait list, right?
Right.
If you're at the top of the list and you ask for more time, they're gonna be more inclined to say, okay, like, well, let's just wait because he's so much better than that first guy on the wait list. Like,
and then that's something you honestly got to feel out as well, because, it really, and I think the best proxy for this is just the timeline and how they get back to you. If they're getting back to you same day or a couple hours later, you're more likely the top candidate on their list. If they're getting back to you a week later or a few days later, you're probably are a maybe for them. And maybe some kid decide to go with another offer and you're kind of their backup, or they just need some more time to think about it and decide how many kids they were going to take. But that's another thing you got to assess is like, okay, if they're giving me that offer super quick, I have a bit more leverage, as opposed to if they're giving me the offer much later and I can tell that I'm kind of a maybe for them, I got to be a bit more conservative what I'm asking for.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, is that one common question we get from students is like, how long does it usually take for me to hear back after interviews? And I say, well, it depends. How'd you do?
Right. Yeah.
If you crush
It's not just about how you do it, it's about how much they like you. Sometimes like it's not even your fault. You know what I mean?
yeah, well, like if you crushed it, or if you
Mhm.
totally just like screwed up, you're gonna hear back pretty quick. That's like a hard
Right.
yes
Right.
or a hard no. And then for
Yeah.
a lot of candidates, you're kind of like in that middle group. So maybe they have
Hmm.
multiple rounds of super days, and they want to see like who else comes through the door before they get back to you. Then you could be
Hmm.
waiting for days, if not weeks, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Happened to me before. And also, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, the biggest piece of advice I have for any student who's going through this recruiting process is, and this is not something that I was great at, is just learn how to be very level headed. It's really hard though, really, really hard because this is a decision that you're making for like quite literally the start of your career. It's a very, very important job, right? Like this is a very life defining moment, which is why Wall Street Mastermind exists because it's helping kids get through this extremely stressful time of getting their full-time job out of college, which can set themselves up for a year, like a lifetime's worth of success. And Sam, you spoke about this many times, but there's lots of ups and downs in the recruiting process. And one of the things you're going to have to get used to is getting ghosted a lot. Like even for someone like me, I mean, not to toot my own horn, like I would say I was relatively successful in the recruiting process. But there were times when like firms would just straight up not get back to me, completely ghost me. I still remember one firm, I won't name names, had, I think I want to say a 5 interview super day with me that Thursday. And I had not heard, and I'd reached out to multiple people at the super day, multiple contacts I had at that firm. None of them even dropped me a peep, like not a single bit. They completely ghosted. And it was pretty hard on me just because like I'm like, wow, like they would really do that. Get used to it. Like life isn't fair and the world is a tough place. You're just gonna have to get used to getting ghosted, as well as the ups and downs that come with rejection and acceptance. And if you can just learn how to be very level-headed and just confident and understand what you're worth, you will be far better than I was in the recruiting process.
yeah. Is this that buy side firm that you interviewed with first?
No, it was a sell side firm.
Or sales? Okay,
Yep.
got it. Yeah, I mean that's a great point. You gotta have thick skin, dude, and
Yep. Yeah. Thick skin is just a necessity in this industry.
you can't be entitled to anything. Like
Nope.
nobody feels like they owe you a response or
Yep.
not to mention an offer. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I guess one last question for you because I think we
Mhm.
covered a lot of good stuff already, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of students that are listening to this specific interview, they can
Mhm.
probably relate to you where they're a top shelf candidate. They're expecting to crush the process. We've already
Mhm.
talked about one thing, which is like managing the timeline, right? And kind of like
Of course.
how to like kind of leverage your offers against each other. But the other thing that I think would be really interesting for people to hear about is like, okay, so you got 6 offers. Obviously, we didn't even consider the first one. So let's talk about the other
Mhm.
5 offers. So you have five
Yep.
offers, right?
Right.
They're all from top banks or top groups. Bulge bracket, there's some bulge bracket offers, some elite boutique offers, even some buy side offers.
Mhm.
What went
Correct.
into your decision making process when it comes to choosing which offer you wanted to take? Because I think that was
Mhm.
obviously a very tough decision. It's a first class function,
Absolutely.
by the way. It was a tough, but it
Yes. Yes.
was a
Very
tough choice
blessed.
because there's so many pros and cons. And honestly, sometimes it feels like you when you have too many options, you don't know which option to go with, right? And so, like, what
Absolutely.
is your decision making process, and ultimately, like, why did you choose the offer that you chose?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it really look, and I hate to be this guy. I really do, but it actually depends. I hate that answer a lot from people, but what I will try to do is give you as much of a triangulated viewpoint on like what went into the decision and how that can be most helpful for future and or current clients of Wall Street Mastermind. So a few things, right? The number one is obviously you got to think about your industry focus. Are you really looking for a generalist focus? Like for example, a lot of my friends are gung ho private equity, folks. All they want to do is get to private equity. And if that's the case, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Get into private equity as early as possible. And it depends on what kind of industry you're interested in. Are you more of a generalist? Do you just want to be a private equity investor who can analyze everything from a waste management company to a high growth SaaS startup? It really comes down to that sort of slice of the cake. For me, I had a particular industry focus that I was focusing on, and that's where I targeted a lot of my recruiting efforts. My offers still ended up shaking out to, by virtue of my recruiting efforts, to be mostly technology focused firms, which is kind of the industry that I was focusing on. That being said, another thing you have to also consider as well is what is the kind of work that you think is going to most lend itself to success? Specifically for me, and this is only for me, I did not care that much about culture. And the reason was because I kind of knew, especially at a place like the sell side, you're not going to be there for long. Personally, I was okay with having a bit of a subpar culture, not to a terrible degree, but a subpar culture if it meant getting insane training ground experience and a great backbone and a branding to be able to succeed later on. So because of that, I was a lot more focused on what would give me the best exit opportunities and the most leverage. And that was really what a lot of went into my process. Because also I'm young, I wanted to preserve a lot of optionality. So that's a lot of what fed into my decision. Another thing I really did, I think this is a huge life hack for anyone going through the offer decision process. I would actually say that the people who are currently at the firm are probably some of the worst people to talk. Like they're great for getting to know the group, but in terms of like what it can provide you post that experience, because let's be real, most of the experiences you're going to be having coming out of Wall Street Mastermind are going to be either summer or 2-year experiences that you're going to eventually leave out. You want to get actually advice, not just from the people who are working at the firm and can give you the good, but ask people who left the firm. That was the biggest life hack I ever did, which was that getting to know people who actually did, have left the firm already, ideally to very successful places, but also maybe not the most successful places, and looking at what did they candidly think about. Because when you're at the firm, you kind of are a little bit forced to speak good on the firm, not have sort of a bad reputation. You kind of always feel like you're being a little bit watched. Whereas once you've left the firm, there are no ties, no strings attached, and people can be super candid about how they felt about the firm, what they thought about the place, what kind of opportunities exist coming out of that firm, as well as what the culture was like, especially when it comes to culture. If you're not someone like me and you really do care about culture and that matters to you, no better way to figure out the culture than to speak to people who've actually left the firm. They will give you their most candid feedback. And I'd say that a combination of all those things, which was number one, industry focus, number two, speaking to people who've left the firm, and also number three, figuring out what are the things that you're looking for from you as exit opportunities, figure out which would give you the best. That's really what fed into my decision of choosing the best offer.
Yeah. And so you ultimately, and by the way, I think it's interesting that you mentioned, you prioritize culture lower on your list and you care more about the training, the exit opportunities and things like that. As you were saying, I was like, well, yeah, of course you did, because just like you said earlier, you're more about delaying short-term gratification for the long term. So
absolutely, to a degree, right? Like you can't go too hard on it and just like hate your life for 2 years. Like there's a difference, but I think like you have to be. It's a delicate balance you got to have, and that just comes down to knowing yourself, which is why I hate the answer, but it depends, right, on what kind of person you are.
No, you're absolutely right, and there's no right or wrong. I'm not saying the way you looked at it was right, and if someone else prioritizes culture over everything else, and they're wrong. I had a different client that recently just turned down an offer from an elite boutique. I won't name names. An elite boutique that's known to be very sweaty. He had a shop to go to another elite boutique and is much happier. And he literally turned down that offer, which arguably most people would say has a better name, has better exit opportunities for another firm where he just gelled with the people a lot more. And that was the most important thing to him. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like you said, it comes down to really knowing who you are and what's going to make you happy, right?
Absolutely. And I was personally lucky enough to find myself a place that actually had both. It was surprisingly that not only the firm that had the best exit opportunities also had the best mentorship and people who I knew there who I really gelled well with. I will say that also in terms of delaying short-term gratification, pay was not that much of an issue for me. And I would actually, obviously it depends on what kind of person you are. I would argue and I would sort of advocate, and then my advice to people would be that I wouldn't worry too much about pay in the short term. And the reason being is this: I think I see a lot of really talented people coming from folks like, from places like my school, from great other, top target schools, who are really all they care about is just making as much money as humanly possible when they're 22. That's great. I think you could definitely ball out for a little bit if that's your thing. But let's be real. You're never going to make the most amount of money at the age of 22. You're probably going to make your peak income at the age of 30, 28, 29, 32, in that range, 40. It could depend, right? But later on in your life for sure. And I would rather trade off the short-term income for the branding, most importantly, and as well as the training and the mentors you can get at a young age, which can put you in a position to reap the rewards of income far later in life, or not far later, but a little bit later in life, than trying to, over-index for income now, get a great paycheck, but maybe not have the best branding, maybe not have the best mentors and exit opportunities that can set yourself up well for a really sick opportunity later in the future. So that was definitely something that I would sort of advise, but obviously, to each their own.
That's a really good point. I thought about the exact same way when I was coming out of school, and That's how advice will do. But now that I'm thinking about the list of firms that you got offers from, if I look at it, I would venture to guess that the offer you ultimately ended up accepting is probably definitely not in the top two in terms of compensation.
No.
Maybe not even in the top three, depending. I don't know. Right. So it's on the lower end of that group of firms that you got offers from. But you're absolutely right, though. It's like if we measure career trajectory by earnings, I'm not saying that's the only thing, but use that as the KPI. Do you want your earnings trajectory to look like this, where it starts out a little bit higher, but it's flatter over time? Or do you want it to look like this, where maybe your pay is a little bit lower in the beginning, but the slope is steeper, right? I can't use that much, but
no, Sam's a flexible guy. Good stuff.
But like that's really what it is. And what you're saying is just, hey, you're thinking more about the slope of that trajectory and how can you make that as steep as possible, even if that means you make a little bit less upfront. And let's be real, like making a little bit less upfront, you're still going to be very comfortable.
Yeah. And also it doesn't even matter so much when you're young because you don't have a family. You don't have kids. You don't have all these fixed assets that you need to pay mortgage on or whatever. And you really are just a young, dumb idiot. I would consider myself one, right? And so, when you're that, you can really afford to maybe not be the most rich guy on the block and forego some of that short-term gratification.
Yeah. Well, and look, we're talking about $10,000, $20,000.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right? Which is, again,
you're still going to be very comfortable at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's not a life-changing amount of money, like you said.
Definitely not.
Man, good stuff, dude. I mean, honestly.
Hey, thank you so much, Sam.
I think this conversation, this interview is a bit different from a lot of the client interviews that we do. I feel like we talked a lot more about like mindset and mentality and just like decision-making frameworks. And I just really want to let other people get inside your head a little bit and see how you think about these things, because I think it's something that a lot of college students can really learn from and just kind of model their thinking after. And so this has been, I think, a super helpful interview for our listeners. At least I think, hopefully they agree. But guys, if you're listening to this and this resonates with you, maybe you're already a pretty good candidate, but you're just not the type of person who's content with just being above average or just, saying I have a non-zero chance of getting what I want. But you're the type of candidate who's like, hey, this is really important to me. Where I start my career is going to determine the slope of that trajectory like we talked about, and you want to take your best crack at that, you want to make your only shot your best shot. Then I want to encourage you guys to reach out to us and see if it's a fit. I'm not saying it's going to be a fit. Sometimes it is and sometimes it is. And we won't know and you won't know until we actually have a conversation around what your goals are, what challenges you feel like you need help with, where can you still get better. And like I said, we'll be very, very candid with you, just like we were with Kelly. We're not going to tell you something that, isn't true. Like if we feel like this is what you can do, we'll tell you exactly what that is, right? With us and without us. And you can make a determination if that's worth the investment to you. And even if not, I think you'll walk away from the conversation, at least just with some valuable insights and takeaways. And we'll give you some advice on, what we think you could do better, right? And so if you want to do that, I would encourage you to just go and book a free strategy session with us. You can do that at www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, by the way. Couldn't get the darn domain when I bought it. So wallstmastermind.com/.
It's shorter for them to remember, so hopefully that's a plus.
Yeah, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply, and we look forward to talking to you guys. All right. So with that said, Kelly, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk.
Sam, thank you, man.
Yeah,
I can't advocate highly enough for this program. It's been very life-changing for me, and really would say that I advise anyone to do it who's really looking to maximize their chances.
I appreciate that, man. And look, I love working with students like you because honestly, it just makes us look good, So.
And thanks for making me doing the same for me. So really, really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. That'll be it for this episode. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the future. And hopefully we get to talk to you soon. All right.